Hello, it's John from Birmingham here. I'm here with Ian Crane. Hi Ian, how are you?
Hey John, how you doing?
Very good, mate. Good to see you. Thanks very much last night for speaking to us at Truth Juice, Birmingham.
Absolute pleasure.
And anybody who's not familiar with Ian's work, you cover a lot of different aspects, the EU, Codex Alimentarius. Last night was about the BP Oil Rig Catastrophe, which happened earlier in 2010. And I would suggest anyone that hasn't seen it to go and look at that presentation that Ian's done. It's on the internet. Very, very important information. The presentation started looking at BP as a whole and as a corporation and as an entity within the world. But after this oil rig explosion, it became apparent to you and many others that this was a contrived event. Can you expand shortly for me on that?
Well, it took a while. I mean, I didn't immediately assume it was a contrived event, although I perhaps should have done, of course, because the day before I had actually sent out a newsletter to my global readership, which numbers about 8,500 or so. But April the 19th was very much imprinted on my brain because it's the day of sacrifice by fire in the belief system of those who think they are the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. I mean, April the 19th, 1993 was the day of the Waco firestorm, which killed, I think it's estimated, somewhere between 72 and 99 people, many of them young children, because the burning Waco complex, the Davidian complex, collapsed on top of them, and so many of the remains were very badly charred. 2 years later, on April the 19th, we had the supposed lone gunman attack of Timothy McVeigh planting his truck bomb outside of the Alfred P. Murrah building, supposedly as a revenge attack for what had occurred in Waco, an attack on the Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms Division of the FBI, which had its Oklahoma headquarters in the Alfred P. Murrah building. But nobody from the ATF was actually in work that day. But tragically, many children were killed in that attack because there was a nursery, I think, on the first floor of the building, which obviously was destroyed in the collapse. But if you look at the photographic evidence of the Alfred P. Murrah building, it's there's no way that an external truck bomb caused that magnitude of damage. The bombs were clearly inside the building, and I say bombs because it is plural, and there was news footage from the time that was broadcast once and once only, which reported the fact that there were unexploded bombs that had been discovered, which is why the emergency services were not permitted to enter into the building because of concerns of more ordnance there. April 20th, 1999 was the day of the Columbine High School massacre, and if you Google April 19th, 20th, you can find there have been a number of events.
World War I started on April 20th?
Is that right?
Well, it was either World War I or II, definitely.
Well, it wasn't II, because that was September the 3rd.
Right, so it must be one.
1939, so it must be one. So, it's Hitler's birthday, April 20th. It's also the British Queen's birthday. So, it's actually April the 19th is also the day in 2005 when the current Pope was appointed to his current position. So April the 19th, 20 certainly has some very significant meaning within the occult belief system of those who think they are the rightful rulers of the planet. So I sent out my newsletter, and of course nothing happened European time on the 20th. But when I woke up on the morning of the 21st, I already had a number of emails from people who were asking me if the Gulf Coast event was what I'd been talking about. And initially I said no, I didn't think so, because I have 20 years in the oil industry with a company called Schlumberger, and so I didn't really want to believe that my former colleagues would ever stoop to perpetrating in such an event. And I even actually spoke at a conference in California in the middle of May, a conference on deep geopolitics. And even at that event, I resisted the temptation to suggest that it was a false flag event, even though I was beginning to suspect that it was. But I didn't have the final piece of jigsaw that I was looking for to confirm that it was deliberately perpetrated. But 1 week after returning from California, absolutely, things fell into place, and I realised that not only was this a perpetrated event, but I was able to actually identify the individual who was placed on the rig to make it happen. Now, I'm not suggesting that that individual was the architect. He was simply the mechanic. He was put on the rig to make it happen. And in the presentation that is available elsewhere on the web, I explain the sequence of events which were orchestrated to put this individual onto the rig, and how this individual orchestrated the disaster occurring. Now, I have been making this observation since basically the beginning of July. It's been out. I've released a DVD on July the 23rd called BP, Population Reduction and the End of an Age. I've given this presentation probably 25 plus times in the last 4 months. It's been recorded on a number of occasions. It's up on YouTube, and of course, basically it's ignored. It's certainly ignored by the mainstream. It's certainly ignored by BP. Their tactic is to just hope that by ignoring it, not enough people will see it and it won't go viral.
You were saying your Amazon account, there's a strange thing where people can't actually search for the DVD, yet you can see it is available.
Exactly. I mean, I can go onto my seller account and I can see that the DVD is there. It's BP, Population Reduction and the End of an Age. But even if you go onto Amazon's own search tool and you pump in Ian Crane BP, you cannot find this DVD.
No matches.
Yeah, there's no matches at all. So it doesn't really surprise me that BP's corporatism has brought this pressure to bear on Amazon, because BP have also successfully managed to get every single photographic image of the two critical persons of interest, to use the Gulf Coast hearing terminology. They've managed to get all photographic evidence removed from the web. So the two individuals who, in my opinion, are the prime focus for the hearing, neither of them have appeared at the hearing, one pleading the fifth, i.e. that he doesn't want to give evidence on the grounds that any evidence he does give may be self-incriminating, and the other individual has just basically been sick the whole time. So the Gulf Coast hearing has no teeth, because as I showed last night from the footage that I have from the Senate, although the recommendation to give the Gulf Coast hearing power of subpoena was passed in the House of Representatives by 420 votes to 1, it didn't even get through the second reading in the Senate.
That's incredible, really.
Of course it's incredible. But what it demonstrates is that the US is a corporatist state. There is no interest in the Senate to give the power of subpoena to the Gulf Coast hearing, because basically the corporate estate does not want the people to know what occurred.
And to examine them.
And to examine the evidence, exactly. So, what they're doing is creating the mythology that this was a series of unfortunate accidents. I mean, Halliburton haven't helped the situation by agreeing to accept some degree of mitigation. I mean, I have explained in the DVD exactly what occurred. I've explained that Halliburton should probably not have pumped the cement job, because BP had already compromised the design of that job, and so consequently the cementing engineer who was on the rig should have refused to pump it, but he did. And
that's all explained in the DVD.
It's all explained in the DVD. And then my former company Schlumberger, I've explained Schlumberger's very critical involvement in the event here, because it was a Schlumberger engineer running the cement bond log test who advised the company man, the BP company man on the rig. He advised the company man at least 12 hours before the rig blew that the rig was unstable, the well was unstable, and that his prognosis was that the well was likely to blow and that the well needed to be shut in. Now, we know this is counsel that the BP company man chose to ignore, and we also know that the Schlumberger guys left the rig at 11 o'clock. There's two conflicting stories surrounding the departure, but everybody does agree that they left the rig at 11 o'clock in the morning of April the 20th of 2010, and 10 hours later the rig blew.
And obviously everyone saw the images of what happened to the Gulf Coast. Absolute natural disaster in terms of the wildlife and the effects on fish and the rest of it. Then, of course, BP went in and tried to help the situation. Do you want to go into that a little bit? Which obviously,
whether BP tried to help the situation is a matter of some.
Well, in their opinion,
of course, what they did was they pumped in at least, and this is what they've admitted to, 1.1 million gallons of an extremely toxic chemical called Corexit 9500. There's an even more toxic version called Corexit 9527A. Now, oil is a toxin at 11.2 parts per million. Corexit is a toxin at 1.2 parts per million. And I mean, the combination of the two is obviously provides a substance of horrendous toxicity. But what the dispersant does is it first of all does the job that it is described as doing. It disperses the oil. But by dispersing it, what it does is it increases the footprint of the slick dramatically, which of course suits BP, because effectively what it also does is it pushes the adjusted slick below the surface of the sea,
out of sight, out
so
of
that
mind.
cosmetically it's all gone. And BP I think some of their liability was going to be based on the magnitude of the visible slick. Well, by dispersing it and pushing it under the surface, then you remove it from sight. But the physical evidence of what is occurring, of course, is horrendous, because the Gulf is becoming a dead zone. Because this subsurface slick is effectively preventing natural sunlight from penetrating through to the deeper waters, and all marine life is effectively dying. Coupled with which oil/Corexit mix is being found inside the fish and the shrimp and the oysters that are farmed from the Gulf. So you have a situation where 60% of all seafood consumed in the United States originates from the Gulf of Mexico. And my observation would be that seafood is now compromised. The safety of that food is compromised. I encourage people to go onto YouTube and take a look for themselves, because there are numerous people, local people, posting reports. I mean, there's one lady who's trying to ensure that real-time information comes out from the Gulf Coast region, and that's a lady called Anita Stewart. That's Stewart. And I encourage people to Google Anita Stewart and read her blogs and look at the photographs and the film footage that she's posting, because that way people will see that this incident is far from over. In fact, quite the reverse. The visible immediate catastrophe, i.e. the rig exploding, burning, sinking, causing the death of 11 people on the rig. But that may have been, just the initial act of destruction. But what's occurring right now, potentially, is a population reduction event. And I'm not referring just to the marine life. We are now getting increasing reports of people being sick and dying in the Gulf Coast region from the effects of the oil Corexit mix, coupled with a naturally occurring bacteria called VIBRIO vulnificus, which is a flesh-eating bacteria. Now, this bacteria is known to be a risk in seafoods, but in the last few months there have been a number of cases of people being infected by VIBRIO vulnificus